Okay, Andrew's question is up next. He says, what are the pros and cons of a will versus a trust? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Okay, so we get this question all the time because I think a lot of people hear buzzwords when it comes to like estate planning or when it comes to estate documents or that sort of thing, and they get a little bit confused, right? So a will is a document that you have drawn up that says at the end of my life, this is what I want to have happen with all of my things, and my things being people that I care about, or my things being stuff that I own, or businesses or real estate or that kind of thing. Your last will and testament basically says your wishes. A trust is actually a tool. It is a type of, I'm going to say account, but account doesn't do it justice. It's a type of entity.
A registration
that can
with
be,
an entity.
Yeah, that can be part of your estate plan. So it is not, do I need a trust or do I need a will? What most often happens is someone says, I have a trust that is mentioned or defined in my will. So the will is the thing that says what's supposed to happen. The trust is an entity or a structure, an account that you use to carry out the wishes that you want inside that trust document. So most often, we don't see it as an either or. It's usually a both and they work in conjunction with one another.
Yeah, and what will happen is when you do a trust or beneficiary designations, those type of things now work outside of the will. They will kind of sit in front of the will. And a lot of people like that, especially if probate or the cost of death is expensive where you live. I know that's such a weird thing to say out loud, but it's true. Or you have somebody you're worried about being incapacitated. You know, if you have cognitive issues or you're worried about becoming disabled, a trust can be a great resource or a registration set up with the document behind it to tell people, hey, no, this person has access to work for my benefit or have access to my assets. So it works great ways, but then you'll still probably want to have a will, not only because a lot of times real estate or just the things that are sentimental in your life, you'll want to have something to speak on your behalf to kind of clean things up behind. So it's not an either or, even though you just kind of need to know what the boundaries, limitations of each of the documents are so you can know how to use them appropriately because they each have a place. I mean, I would say most estate documents that we're working with, people have both. They have a trust, they have their wills. It's definitely not an either or. It's more of making sure that there's a purpose and a plan for every dollar that you're managing and in control of.
Now, the question that you posed was, okay, pros and cons. Now, realistically, I'm going to say that if you have an updated will that accurately reflects your wishes, there is no con to having a will in place. There's no downside to having one. Now, if you have a will that you did 20 years ago when your kids were little and your financial circumstances have changed and the people in your life have changed and the family situation has changed, well, you could have a bad thing. The con could be a will you need to make sure is updated periodically as your life changes. But outside of it becoming stale, I don't think there's a downside.
Probate.
Well, okay, well, yeah.
Wills have probate, so whatever jurisdiction you live in, where you live matters on how estate documents are executed.
But you would still, even someone who's using trust to avoid probate would still need a will.
Right,
That's what I'm saying.
They would still have a will, but you can say, okay, well, if I know that wills have this downside, can I get creative with the titling or structure of these assets that I think that I don't want to either have the expense of probate or I don't want to have the time wasted waiting to go through probate and get those letters of testamentary. Now we could think about a trust because also you have to die with a will. Wills only become effective when you die, whereas a trust can be set up to where it's very effective even while you're living, but maybe incapacitated. So that's why I think that it's not an either or. It's back to they're both very effective, but they do completely different things. And this is why, look, we kind of walk people through, and this is probably a great way to kind of close out the question. When you're at the beginning of your journey, you just don't have a lot going on. That's why it's important to do that exercise of doing a net worth statement. Make sure your beneficiary designations on all of your retirement accounts is good. But then your life gets complicated. You get married, and then you have children. And by goodness, when you have children, you better have a will because the guardianship and what happens to your kids is so important. But then you keep progressing And you realize, man, I'm not worried only about my kids and my assets. I'm worried about how do I have access, or how do I make sure that I still have some type of control, but people can speak and manage. That's where the trust will kind of then slot in. This keeps getting more and more complex. You notice we're keeping talking about complexity. That is what success creates. And once again, like most things, I can give you as much free advice, but you're going to quickly realize, man, how do I get this into my personal life? You know, I have all these unique things, and I'm completely different from my neighbor who's also successful down the street, but they're structured differently. Welcome to the wonderful world of financial planning and the abundance cycle. And this is what a good financial planner who works with an estate attorney is hopefully going to be able to navigate a lot of this stuff.